Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brian Rose. I'm from the Google Photos team. I'm here presenting Thomas Hawk for a part of our photographers at Google series. Thomas Hawk is a prolific photographer. He's here from the Bay Area, and one of his life goals is to produce more than 1 million photographs. He's well on his way there. If you're on Google+, you've probably, or actually you've almost certainly seen his photos, either reshared by his friends, shared in your own stream, or in our What's Hot stream. At 450,000 followers, he's most certainly one of our top followed photographers, but he's also one of our most followed users on Google+. Last night, he launched his Photo Talk Plus live-streamed Hangouts, which he co-hosts with Lotus Carroll every Wednesday evening, and I encourage you to check it out, not just because I was on there last night. For a quick bit of admin, there will be plenty of time for Q&A, but I encourage you to use the microphones on the side for the benefit of our YouTube and video conference audience. So with that, please join me in welcoming Thomas Hawk to the Photographers at Google series.
Well, thank you, Brian, and thanks for everybody for coming out. I'm glad to be here at Google. I'm a big fan of Google's, and I've enjoyed Google Plus and all the great things you guys are doing with photography. So I'm happy to be here today, and looking forward to sharing some photos and talking a little bit about just sort of my vision in general with photography and how I approach it and how I look at it and how I kind of do what I do. Brian said, yeah. Oh, is that better? Okay. Yeah, my goal is to publish 1 million photographs before I die, which is a pretty ambitious goal. There have been a lot of prolific photographers over the years, and I've kind of tried to find out photographers that are doing that much publishing, and there's not a lot of them out there. For me, I'm not sure exactly where that comes from, other than I have a desire to constantly be active with photography and see the world through my camera every single day. And by setting a very arduous schedule like that and a very lofty goal, it really helps me to be focused constantly on photography. One thing, like I would just say everybody in this room, I also have a day job. I'm not a professional photographer. And so one of the questions I get a lot is, well, how do you do so many photographs? How do you do so much work and still kind of manage your other stuff in your life? And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that today and what I do. In addition to a full-time job, I've got four young kids. I've got a 7, 8, 9, and 11-year-old. So, I found photography, as passionate as I am about it, you've really got to be incredibly efficient with it, and you've got to make it work for you in every way. So I'll talk about some of the things that I do to become more efficient in my own work, as well as, in addition to that, talk about one of my projects right now, which is to photograph the 100 largest American cities. I've photographed now 31 of the 100 largest American cities. I'm doing more and more each year. And so this year I'm going to knock off some more. I'm going to do Route 66 from Tulsa to Los Angeles. This year I went to St. Louis and Houston and Austin and Detroit and a number of other places. So I'll talk about those trips and how I plan for those trips and how I decide what I'm going to shoot on those trips and how I do those trips as efficiently as I can. And then I'm also going to talk a little bit about just my experience with photo sharing in general. I've been online sharing photos for a while now. I guess I first started in about 2003. I got involved with Flickr very, very early and became one of the most active Flickr users and most followed users there, and talk about sort of my strategy with that. I will say to start, again, like I said before, I'm not a professional photographer, although I do make money with my photography. It's not my primary source of income. I think that for me, being able to focus just on my art as a non-professional photographer affords me certain luxuries. And one of those is, I don't care a lot about, making money with my work. I don't care if people steal my work. Everything's licensed Creative Commons. I don't watermark things. I don't try to prevent people from getting my stuff. My goal as an artist is that people will see my stuff as much as possible everywhere. So because I don't have to worry about making a living for it, I think that's an important distinction. Also, I can shoot what I want to shoot. and I can really focus on what I want to shoot. And I think for all of you that have day jobs, that's a nice luxury to be able to have. A lot of photographers that are professional photographers, they don't necessarily have that luxury. They have to say, okay, well, I'm shooting these weddings. Last night on our show, we interviewed Scott Jarvie, who's a professional wedding photographer, and he's got to do his weddings, and he's got to do this, and he does other stuff. But I think I've got a luxury to be able to shoot sort of whatever I want, which is nice. So I'm going to also go through some pictures up here while we talk in general. And sort of talk about that. We recently did a trip to Death Valley and had a great time. There are a number of Googlers on there, including our own Brian Rose and his wife Kim, who out on the playa. And there's some more pictures from Death Valley. That's Lotus Carroll, my co-host. Some of you may know Vincent, doing a big jump out on the playa. This was a playa called the Racetrack. And beautiful colors in Death Valley. So I'm going to go through some pictures as well. The first thing as far as time goes, the question I get a lot is, how do you do your job? How do you do your kids? And how do you still have so much time to take photos? The first thing is the camera goes with me everywhere. And, if you're serious about photography and you want to take it up, on the side, in addition to your job, I would say being able to carry that camera with you everywhere is a good thing, good place to start. I take this backpack with me a lot of places, which has all my lenses as well, so I'm a little hardcore with it. But even if it's just a micro four thirds or a smaller camera or just a digital SLR and a zoom lens, something like that, I think carrying it with you everywhere you go, I'll steal time. I live in the East Bay and I work in San Francisco, so if I'm going to take the BART home, I'll purposely backtrack on the BART so I can get a seat so I can be processing photos the entire time. I try to make the most efficient use for photography of all of my time that I'm not working or with my family or kids. So a big part of that is thinking about that as your day. If I'm going to have some exercise, yesterday I was going to take a walk, so walk around with the camera in San Francisco, take it out, do an impromptu photo walk all by yourself. So I find that if you incorporate other areas of your life, like commuting, and sometimes if you're driving, you can't really process while you're driving, but if you're commuting, if you're exercising, anything you do, find time to do that. As far as my project for the 100 Largest American Cities, I think we all travel. And when I took on this project, I knew that I wasn't going to have a lot of time in individual cities. So I wanted to figure out how I could most efficiently shoot those cities. And the first thing I do before I go on a trip is I very carefully research exactly what I'm going to shoot. I found Flickr is the best resource for that. I'll usually go to a city. I'll look for, say, the city of Chicago or the city of St. Louis. I'll sort that by interestingness on Flickr, and I'll look at a lot of what other people have taken, interesting shots. I'll get a lot of my locations from that. I'll use that as a location scout. A lot of the photos on Flickr are geotagged. If they're not geotagged, a lot of times you can figure out where they are anyways. So, and with those points ahead of my trip, I'll make a Google map, and I'll go in and I'll put the pinpoints of every place I'm going to shoot in that city, and I don't always get to all of them, on that map before I ever even leave. In fact, weeks before. And I'll also coordinate them. So if there's something that I really, really want to shoot, I'll use a different kind of pin. If it's, okay, well, I'd like to get that, it'd be nice, I might use a different pin. And so before I ever leave, I've got a very, very well thought out map of exactly what I'm going to shoot. Once I go on the trip, I'll coordinate my route so that I hit a lot of the things in a row. I don't want to waste any time. I sleep very little on the trip. I usually do long weekends, so I'll do a Friday to Monday because I can get away from work during that time, and I'll use every sort of waking hour I can possible focused on shooting this agenda that I've mapped out for myself. I try to avoid driving during rush hour. So if I know I'm going to be in a car, I'll purposely plan my trip around that. I'll have places that I'm going to be walking around and shooting during rush hour. I'll make the most of my sunrises and sunsets. If I'm going to Austin, I want to shoot the Pennybacker Bridge at sunrise. I'll be out there. I'll have that already set out. So I have my sunsets and sunrises especially planned. Those are also oftentimes times around rush hour traffic, so you want to find a good, very picturesque location to shoot. when I'm also when I plan on the trips, I think backup is really important. I learned early on that inevitably, for whatever reason, you end up losing photos on trips. I don't know what it is. So one time the hard drive goes bad. It's the one time something goes wrong. Your memory card malfunctions. You accidentally format your card when you thought you had got all your photos off of them, but that you didn't. So there's a lot of mistakes you can make. I bring with me just a little 1 terabyte Firewire 800 Seagate portable drive. I can't remember what they're called, but they're not that expensive. And I use that as a time machine drive on my Mac. So everything gets backed up as I go. So if I lose stuff, I'll be able to get it back. I have lost stuff, I've got it back. Even recently in Death Valley, I went to bed and I thought all the photos had been copied. I thought they were, and I took the card off in the morning and I reformatted and I used it, and then I realized that I missed like 200 photographs at the end of my racetrack. So I had to use card recovery software to get them back. And so I was able to get them back. So you can, even when you format a card, you can still almost every time get the pictures back with recovery software. But you have to be very mindful of losing pictures, and particularly if you're going to go on a trip and you're going to take 10, 12, 13, 15,000 photographs, you want to make sure that they're backed up. So I clear out a lot of space on my hard drive on my Mac. I've got a 750 gigabyte hard drive internally, so I make sure I have a lot of room there. And then I have a time machine drive that backs up everything. I've got a formula where every night when I come in at the end of the night, I have to religiously do certain things. One is I have to make sure all my cards are offloaded. I don't use Adobe Lightroom to offload my cards and import it, although I might do that at home because it's slower. So I just drag and drop them from this is a date folder to a date folder as fast as I can. I've got a 64 gigabyte card. I got to get a lot of pictures off. I don't have time. I want to go to sleep. So I also steal time during the day. You do get tired. You can't go 20 hours straight. So, you need bathroom breaks, you need water breaks. Starbucks, I use a lot of times for that. Starbucks is great because they're consistent. They're going to have a bathroom. They're going to have coffee and caffeine, which I live on. They're going to have water. So I'll plan that. And they usually have power, and they have Wi-Fi, so free Wi-Fi. So it's very, very consistent. So whatever I think about their coffee, it kind of doesn't matter. I'll get a little coffee and I'll just focus on my stuff and get it done when it breaks. So, but to use all that time efficiently while I'm having coffee, while I'm going to the bathroom, I'm off. Well, not when I go to the bathroom, because unless somebody's watching my computer and stuff, because I'll steal it. But I'll make sure that I get those pictures off during the day and then reformat the card and keep using it. But at the end of the night, that always needs to be done. The batteries need to be out and charged. I keep 3 fully charged batteries, but at the end of the day, I'm putting one in. It's the last thing I do before I go to bed. Make sure you've got a fully charged battery the next morning. And so I think that's sort of my routine. Every night do that. Then you're ready, fresh for the next day, have the bag packed, have it ready to go for sunrise. Question?
Do you travel by yourself or with people?
Well, that's a good question. I do travel by myself sometimes. I can be very efficient, and a lot of times I travel with people. So speaking of people, that's another point. When I'm preparing my trip, I mentioned I make a map. Another thing that I do frequently is I'll go, and this is usually in Flickr, but I'll go to the local Flickr user group for that town. So maybe it's Detroit, maybe it's Miami. There's inevitably a group focused in that area, and I'll say, hey, I'm coming to town. And I have found that almost every town I've gone to, I've ended up hooking up with some locals. And in addition to all the stuff I can find on Flickr and map out, locals are fantastic because oftentimes, and if you look at their work and see what they're shooting, you can find out. So my friend Michelle, who's down in Miami, who I'd never met before, I kind of knew her online. We were a little, kind of friends, but we became really good friends when I went down to Miami. So she has all these great abandoned spots. We're shooting this old abandoned boat racing amphitheater, and it's graffiti everywhere, and we're up on the roof of it, and you get great shots and all of that. And I find by finding locals, must verify the account. Google Music Manager. I like Google Music, by the way. So I'm going to flip through a few more of these while we talk. But I find locals are very, very helpful. Look for locals. One of the things I hope at some point I'm able to do a little bit better with Google Plus. I created in Google Plus at one point a little post and created a Google map and said, hey, if you're on Google Plus, put yourself on this map. We don't really have anything like that right now, I think, in Google Plus, but I would love that. I'd love to be able to say, okay, I'm going to go to Detroit. Who are all the photographers in Detroit? Who are all the photographers in New York? Who are all the photographers in, Kansas City? So I can hook up with them when I go to these trips and say, hey, let's hang out. Let's go shoot this or that. I went to Toronto, which isn't an American city, but I like to think of the Canadians as, almost Americans. No, just kidding. Canadians are great. Canadians are like the most politest people in the world. So I had a great time shooting in Toronto. But when I went up to Toronto, I hooked up with this guy Tom's, who's a roof topper. And we're sitting there, we're going up on these roofs in Toronto, 50 stories high, setting our tripods up, getting some of the most amazing, amazing night scenes that you've ever seen. And, with the CN Tower and stuff like that. So you'd never have access to that without a local. So I find before I go on the trip, all of this takes planning, but, get to know some of the local people, get to know the local user group. Sometimes the locals don't always want to share, but a lot of them do. When I went to Detroit, and I said, hey, I'm coming to Detroit, a lot of people were like, oh, you're just going to shoot abandoned stuff, and that's terrible, and we don't want people shooting abandoned stuff. But, you go to Detroit, you got to shoot abandoned stuff. So, they're kind of sensitive to that in Detroit. So you got to kind of feel out the locals and feel what they want to do. But I find that having a group and going with the group is helpful sometimes, a small group. I've shot cities all by myself too. I went to Memphis, shot it by myself, but hooked up with one other guy. So Sean Davis, who's a local in Memphis, who knows a lot about it and took me to a lot of spots. We're on the top of the Peabody Hotel. Speaking of hotels, before you go, I like to look at where are all the view spots. Where can you get up high in a city? So do a little bit of research. Is there a bar? Even in San Francisco, our own city, up here, you can get to the top of the Marriott. There's a great view from up there. They have a bar up there on the top. There are some places you can get on top of the Mandarin Hotel in San Francisco, which has a wonderful view down to the Transamerica building. So hotels are also great for getting on the top of, because a lot of times you can get into a hotel. It's not like an office building where they got security and everything, and you can frequently find your way on the roof. I know this kind of sounds crazy, but I find 50, 60 times, and yes, you're probably technically trespassing and all that, but 50, 60% of the time you can get on most hotel roofs. And those are some great places to take shots. So, we'll do some of those from the roofs and stuff sometimes. I think if I do go to a city and do a photo walk, and I do a lot of photo walks, I've probably done, 125 photo walks. I'll go and schedule that if it's a big photo walk for one night for like 3 or 4 hours, because it's really hard, I think, on big photo walks to really focus on shooting a city. You can't shoot it; they're more of a social thing. So if I do a photo walk in a city like that, but if you get too many people, we went on a trip to Boston with some friends from Flickr, and there were probably 20 people, and it was too many. You can't keep a track of everybody. You kind of lose people. So I think planning the trip, having everything, having a route, having everything on Google Map before you go. When I'm there, there's no time to be online. I'm not going to be socializing. I got to focus on shooting. I'm not going to be processing. You have to resist the urge to process. You just took all these great shots and you're like, oh, I just got up at sunrise and shot the bean. I want to process this and get it online. It's so cool. I want to do it right now. You can't. You've got to focus, shoot. There'll be time for that later. I know in Death Valley it was like, oh boy, we just shot this racetrack. Oh, I want to process them. But, resist the temptation. I think one of the other things I do if I'm driving and I have my route, in addition to having it on a map and on the phone, I actually print it out by the address and order of what I'm going to shoot. So I have actually a printout in case all of a sudden you won't be able to connect on the internet or something happens and you can't get it. So I think having a printout helps as well. I think considering bundling trips is also a great way to do it. I'll shoot Nashville and Memphis, Austin and Houston, cities that are close together, to try to maximize the travel time. As far as post-processing goes, that's a big part of it. I use Lightroom to process my photos, but I don't have a lot of time. You have to go very, very quickly. If I'm going to publish 1 million photos, my goal is I have to process at least 350 photos a week. And if I'm gone the weekend before because I'm doing a shoot, that means 700 the next weekend. So you got to power through them, and you can't spend more than a couple of minutes on a shot. These are some shots I took at the decompression event recently in the city in San Francisco, sort of a Burning Man in the city sort of thing. I love shooting people. These are all sort of interesting looking people that were at this thing. And I shoot anything and everything. I shoot people, I shoot landscapes, I shoot nature, I shoot, flowers, I shoot, concerts. Sure.
So approaching people, how do you, clearly some of these people knew you were taking a picture.
Right.
So what's your tactic for getting them to buy in? And do you get releases or do you just get their permission?
Well, because I'm not concerned at all about the economics of this business, I don't get model releases because I'm not going to sell it as a stock picture. And you could still publish it as a photograph, and you could certainly even still put it in a magazine or a newspaper if it's editorial. It's not, or if it's fine art. The courts have ruled that if it's a fine art photograph, it can also qualify for no release. So I don't bother with releases at all. I find it kind of depends on what I'm shooting and where I'm shooting and how I'm shooting. And an event like this, people are into it. They're getting dressed up because they want to kind of show off. And so, you see this guy, you still ask his permission. I say, hey, can I get a picture? Yeah. And you just, and these are shot with a fisheye, 8 to 13 millimeter fisheye. So I'm this close to his nose. So I got to warn him and I got to say, hey, I'm going to be getting real close here. Okay. Just so you're not freaked out. And he's, yeah, fine. And the fisheye, that's a new lens I got, so I've been kind of going a little bit crazy with it. So you can get, super close. So I think, one idea to get people is find festivals and events like this. So Decompression in the City, obviously Burning Man happens every year. I've never gone actually myself, but I'm going to be going this year. But, parades, the Gay Pride Parade in San Francisco, any sort of events like that. I found the vast protests. Protests are great. I was shooting the Occupy San Francisco protests yesterday. I mean, you could get right in the cop's face with a camera and take the right in the protester's face with a camera. You can get some compelling, engaging portraits. This guy, by the way, was completely naked except he was covered in silver. I'm not going to show you the picture from lower down, but we'll avoid that one. But I find that you can a lot of places like that. Other times though, I'm just shooting street. I'm out on the street. I got the camera. It's bam, 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 bam. You're not asking permission. You don't want to ask permission. Comic book conventions, stuff like this. I mean, again, to get great portraits of interesting people. This was at Comic Palooza in Houston. So places like this. You got Superman there. So I think you can look for those if you want to take interesting pictures of people. I do a $2 portrait series where anybody that asks me for money, oops, a camera there. Anybody that asks me for money, I started a couple years ago saying, I'll take your portrait for $2. I'll give you $2 and take your portrait. I found that wasn't even so much, I think, of a photography-driven project as much as it was when I first came to San Francisco. I was right out of college, and I'd give people would ask me for spare change. Oh, yeah, sure, here you go. And after a while, I'm like, geez, this is all the time. And, I kind of started resenting it, and then pretty soon I stopped giving them money, and then I probably started avoiding people, and I didn't like that, being out on the street and kind of avoiding people. So I said, I'm going to just one day I was in Portland shooting on the Burnside Bridge. The Burnside? I think it's called. And I had my headphones on and I was shooting. A lot of times I listen to music, and this guy, homeless-looking kind of guy, was kind of walking past me, and he said something to me, and I said, "I'm sorry, I don't have any money," because I assumed he was asking for that. And the guy got very agitated, and so I, stopped, and I hadn't heard him, and I took my headphones off and said, "Oh, I'm sorry." It's like, I wasn't asking you for money. It's like, I want to know if you'd take my picture. And I just felt like a jerk, what a jerk I was. And so I felt really bad, and I ended up taking the guy's picture, and it was kind of a moment for me when I said, if I'm out here being on the street and part of the street, I need to treat people with respect, and I can't be doing that. And so I said, I'm going to turn this aversion I have that people ask me for money into a photography project, and I started my $2 portrait project, and I've taken a number of photographs now of individuals, and I also usually publish a story. Here's one right here. I publish a story about the individuals, and I get a little bit about them, and I talk to them as a human being, and I say, hey, what's your story, and do you have kids, and do you want to do this project? And 95% 5% of the time they do want to do the project. They say, yeah, that's great, terrific, and they're thankful and grateful. And so that's another place I get portraits. You know, I think if I find them in odd ways, and sometimes you see an interesting guy on the street, I'll just go, hey, can I take your picture? A lot of times they say no, you know, but you know, a lot of times they say yes. So I'll do portraits like that. And sometimes I just shoot randomly. Every now and then you get somebody that gets really angry with you, you know, and you just got to kind of, you know, Henry Cartier-Bresson said he used to use the term shoot and scram too. Sometimes you shoot and scram, you got to take off. But I think there's, you know, if you really look for it, there's sort of enough events that you can find. These were shots that I took in Houston. I love shooting street art and graffiti, so I look for that ahead of time, look where the graffiti yards are, and go shoot a lot of that. A lot of that's temporal. This is just a street shot, so she didn't know I was taking her photograph. I just, bam, took it. So sometimes I'll just take photographs too. I love cemeteries. I'll shoot in cemeteries. There's wonderful statuary you can find sometimes. So Weeping Angel, and I think it's Evergreen Cemetery maybe in Houston.
Thomas,
Yeah.
so one of my favorite things to do when I'm in an area where I don't necessarily want to get up in someone's face, like recently I was in Jordan and I definitely don't want to stand out. So I would just keep my camera at my hip and take
Yeah.
pictures of people from my hip. Sounds kind of strange, but besides, you know, obviously using your lens as a way to take a photo, do you have a favorite body part where you like to take your photograph?
Yeah, sometimes, you know, I will shoot from the hip, so to speak. There are some reasonably rough areas in San Francisco that I've shot, like the Tenderloin and whatnot, where I know there's an active drug deal going on right there. You're watching the crack change in the hands, and I've gotten some photos of those. And I'm careful also how I publish some of those these days. I got called into court after shooting the Oakland riots, and I got subpoenaed and had to go to court and do a lot of stuff, but I wasn't crazy about that. Because I was taking pictures of looters that were looting in the Oakland riots. But a lot of times when I'm shooting from the hip or something like that, I'll actually have the camera around my neck, and I'll hold it, and I have a cable release connected in my pocket. And you want to shoot at something like f8 or a big wide aperture. You know, f8 and be there, as a photojournalist saying, you know, because you want to have you know, a lot of room for your focus. So if you get it wrong, you're still getting it because you're not looking through the viewfinder. And I'll shoot, you know, with the cable release, you know, just walk around and shoot stuff. A lot of times you get stuff that's not worth using, you know. I don't do that a lot. I like to use the viewfinder, and it's only kind of if I'm in a kind of sketchy area or there's not a, you know, a real easy way to kind of be out there like this. You know, if there's a drug deal going down and you're, you know, you might not have your camera. Yeah, or your life. So, I mean, they usually don't like being photographed. So, but it is street.
Do you ever get into trouble with the terms of service for publishing those kinds of photos?
What do you mean, terms of service? Like how?
Have your account suspended?
Oh, there's just another street photograph. But yeah, so, well, speaking of that, so we'll get into that a little bit too. We'll talk about photo sharing sites. So I started out with Flickr. That's probably the big site that I was on. First of all, I'm a fan of joining every site. You know, I think as far as a photographer, if my goal is to be seen by as many people as possible and to be published as many places as possible, I want to be on Flickr, I want to be on Twitter, I want to be on Facebook, I want to be on Googleplex. I also think, though, that you pick a site as sort of your primary social place where you're going to interact. For me, that's Googleplex. I think it's the most superior platform for photographers right now. We like Googleplex. And Googleplex, I've written a number of blog posts on it. You guys are doing, you know, I think everything right for photographers, and it's been so refreshing because before Google Plus, I really think Flickr was sort of the game in town, and you know, Flickr had a lot of problems, which we'll go through a little bit. But Google Plus is a terrific place for photographers, a terrific resource. The photo pages look great. The big photos in the Lightbox look great. There's tremendous engagement. There's a great, strong community thanks to your leaders and community managers, you know, like Natalie and like Brian, and people that are out there engaging the community. And not just them, you know, people like Ricardo and people that aren't even necessarily community managers, but just a lot of people at Google seem very enthused by photos and are a part of that. On our Death Valley trip, I don't know, I think there were probably 10 Googlers that went on the trip. So Gerard, you were there, and you know, so we had a good. Vega was there, and so we had a great trip. And I think Google's really sort of shown a commitment to photography. And from my perspective, you want to go, you know, you want to go also where things are going, not where things have been. So to go back to Flickr a little bit, and have I gotten into trouble? I've gotten into a lot of trouble on Flickr, both terms of service type issues, some of which were kind of stupid, other issues that were just more personal in matter. With Flickr, I was banned from their help forum for about 2 years. I was blacklisted from Explore. They claimed they didn't have a blacklist, which is the section where they promote people, but they personally blacklisted me out of it as a user. And I was critical of Flickr, and I think I took the wrong approach with Flickr initially. So I'm never going to be critical of Google+. I think the problem with Flickr is, early on, because I was a very early user, before Yahoo ever bought them, before anything, back when, I'd banter back and forth with Stuart and stuff, and we would argue and fight and things like that. Stuart Butterfield, who was one of the co-founders of Flickr. There were things that I thought that Flickr should have. Initially, the very, very first thing I think I got cited with Flickr was trackbacks. And I said, hey, everybody's getting these views on our photos. We don't know where they're coming from. We want to know where they're coming from. Why? Flickr's capturing this data. Why can't you give it to us? And Stuart would say, well, if we give it to you, then there'll be spam. Well, no, I don't understand that. How could there be spam? This is just a referral URL you're sharing with us. And Flickr eventually did give us that. But I think in doing that, I would find things that I didn't like about Flickr, and I would sometimes be more abrasive than I should have, I think, in hindsight. And particularly, Flickr had a practice for a long time where if an account was deleted, it was deleted. It was gone. There was no getting it back. And so, I had content removed. I was an administrator of a group called Delete Me Uncensored, which is kind of a failed experiment now in hindsight, which I probably shouldn't have been involved with so much. But the idea was it was a voting game in a group, but it was also an uncensored forum. So you say whatever you want. And, people would say whatever they want. And there would end up being harassment in there and things like that, to the point where Flickr nuked our entire group one time. And, so there were, I ran a lot afoul with some of the terms of service, and Flickr's were very, very broad. It was, don't be that guy, whatever that means. So I've had content, I had a huge content battle that I can't really talk too much about because I was sued and I had to settle. And so as part of the settlement terms is there's a confidentiality agreement. But with the Erotic Art Museum down in Miami, where I took some pictures, and I can't get too much into it, but, so I've had some sort of problems like that in the past that I'm not going to have on Google+. I think, one of my strategies is to be a factory and be a machine. I describe myself as a photography factory sometimes, which is to publish every single day. And schedule publish. So I publish 5 posts to Google+. One in the early morning, one in the mid-morning, one about noon or 1, one in the afternoon, one in the evening. I've got them all picked out already. So I've got this folder right here, which has about 9,000 photographs in it that I've already selected. So, these are photos that I like enough to publish. And so, there'll be, and every day I just pull from this folder a different photo, kind of at random. And I want the photos to kind of be at random also, because over time, I want there to be diversity in my photo stream. So I want some San Francisco, some Chicago, all over the United States, different places and time. So I just pick every day, and then I upload. Right now I'm uploading like 40 a day to Flickr, and so I'll publish more there. And with Flickr, my strategy is to publish my best 5 last, because that's only what people see on Flickr. They don't see the other ones. Another strategy I think with online, I mentioned Delete Me Uncensored, is I'm at the point now where you just have to avoid toxic people. There are toxic people out there, and one of the things that's really nice about Google Plus is it has a very robust block feature. I've already seen it a lot on Google Plus even, but I'll see there's, Elena Callis has this guy that just like rips into her all the time. She's like, oh, she's a terrible underwater photographer. Why do people like her? And take a guy like that, boom, gone, blocked. You don't see him. I had a guy the other day came on my photo screen. You're the worst photographer I've ever seen, ever. And I'm replying back to her for a little bit. Really, the worst, the absolute worst. There's nobody worse than me. No, you are the worst. So, there's, Trey has some, HDR haters. You guys know Trey Ratcliffe. They'll come in there, oh, what, you're destroying photography. You're ruining, the 100 years of what photography is all about. And, you just block them. So now I'm at the point where I just block. And that's, by the way, a weakness of Flickr, because if you block somebody at Flickr, that means they can't comment on your photos, but they can still comment in the groups that you're in. They can still follow your friends and comment on there, and you still have to see it. The nice thing about Google Plus is, man, you wipe somebody out, they're out. They're gone. So I think that's a good thing, and that's something I've learned with photographing online. There are some things that Flickr does really right, I think, and that I think Google really should take a look at, and some places where I think they are doing it right. I think it's easy to blog and embed their photos. Right there from the photo, you can get an embed code and put it on your blog. Now I've been blogging some of my Google Plus photos, but I've had to custom create that HTML, and so I, myself and put that code in there. You can go to Picasa and get some, but it's wonky and it doesn't look very good. So I think that's a thing they do very well. I think the groups have been a success there, but they've never capitalized on them. Interestingness was an interesting idea to rank photos by social activity and the metadata around them. Flickr even got a patent on it, which I can't believe that they would give them a patent on that. They had the API. They were there early. The Flickr blog, they do a good job. The sign-in accounts with Facebook and Google, I thought was a great move that they did. $25 for an unlimited photos is a great deal. In fact, I think Google should think about that. Google has right now, at least with Picasa, it's based on, how much storage you use. So, I think for somebody like me, it would end up costing me, potentially, if I had the same amount as I do on Flickr, like $500 a year or something like that. And I don't really think that's the best model, because I think photographers that are popular, that are putting a lot of photographs on there, even if they're big, I think you want them. You want that content on the site, and so you want to encourage it. Flickr's $25 for, kind of all you can publish, I think is a good deal. Flickr's got the Getty deal, which is 20% payout, which is terrible, which Google could totally rock that, because 20% payout to photographers is terrible. And Google could do something with stock. It's a multi-billion-dollar business. I mention it a lot, but it is something with Flickr that they have that's an advantage, because I get paid, $500 a month just for having an account on Flickr. So I'm actually get paid because this Getty thing, and people buy my images and use them on Getty because I don't really have to do anything except, okay, here you go. Here's 200 of my images. Use them. And Getty markets them. Getty sells them. People find them through Getty. So I think Google should maybe think about something like that. Organization. I think the way that they have albums is better. You can use Supersetter, so I have 1,600 albums at Flickr, sets. And I can say, okay, anything that's got this keyword in, Occupy San Francisco on this date, do this, make it a set. And it just automatically does it. It's kind of like smart playlists with iTunes. I think that's a smart way to do album management. What Flickr's doing wrong, innovation's completely stalled. I don't know if you guys saw the latest products they released. One was like an Android app, which was pretty awful. The other one was they had this thing where I can connect up with another Flickr user, and we can look at a Flickr photo together and chat with each other. It's like, who's going to use that? Nobody's going to use that. I mean, we got Hangouts at Google Plus. I mean, if I want to, I can have all these people in a room and show the picture right there, and people can see it. So, I mentioned that they have bad blocking tools, the ability to. The other issue that's come up a little bit with Google, and it's sort of a controversial hot button, and I don't know the answer, and I'm sure you guys are all smart and thinking about it, but is what do you do with adult-oriented content? Some people say that's a very easy question. What Flickr has done is they've just created filters. So if I want to do adult-oriented content, I'll mark it as adult-oriented content. If people opt into that thing, then they can see it, and if they don't, then they don't see it, and it's filtered out, and that'll work. I don't think that's worked for Flickr, and I think that what's happened at Flickr is there's this ginormous underside that a lot of people don't see because safe search is on by default, so a lot of users never see it. But there is a huge, giant amount of underground porn on Flickr, and it's all amateur-based porn, and I don't know that you want that. I don't think you want to be. Certainly don't think Google wants to be associated with that. I doubt Yahoo wants to be associated with it. I don't think that they necessarily meant for that to happen. But on the other hand, what do you do with somebody that might be a little cutting edge and might show a little nipple because it's a fine art photograph and it's something that probably should be allowed to be shared between two consenting adults, and it's art. So that's a line, and I don't know what the answer is, but that's something else to think about. So with that, that's kind of what I wanted to talk about with my own photography a little bit, and as well as some of these other sites, and Flickr and Google Plus. I've got some of my Google Plus photos that I've published here recently too. And that's in Seattle, the Seattle Central Library, which is wonderful architecture. It's another one from Death Valley. That's Lotus Carroll, who does the show with me. I took that photograph yesterday of a police line at Occupy San Francisco where they arrested 3 people in the street that were blocking Market Street. I do a lot of out of focus work. Man, that drives people nuts. I put that stuff on Google Plus and inevitably, whoa, you forgot your glasses? Were you drinking? This is the view I see when I get out of the bar. It's certainly an aesthetic, but sometimes people really hate it. It's a police officer the morning after Occupy San Francisco when they cleared him out of there. It's an architectural building in Fort Worth. Again, this is something that was on my pinpoint. This is a point on my map. I want to shoot this, the Modern, which is the Modern Art Museum in Fort Worth. Beautiful architecture. There's a picture of Scott Jarvie. I'll go crazy with the photo processing sometimes. It's a mirror effect right down the middle. A shot in Sacramento in the rain with neon signs. I collect neon signs. I've got about 10,000 photographs of neon signs. The Botanical Garden in St. Louis is the best botanical garden I've ever been to any place in my life. Wonderful stuff to shoot there. There are 2 of my children. That's Kate and Holly in a tunnel down in Los Angeles. Cable cars. Love graffiti. So questions?
Yeah, I found it's a little intimidating getting started with photography. Like, there's a very big difference between novices and then people that are really good at photography. So can you talk about a little bit about like the equipment, how much of
Sure.
it is you and your vision, and how much of it is having a multi-$1,000 camera and lens?
I think very little of it is having, when you're starting out, is having a multi-$1,000 camera and lens and all that. I think you could take pictures with a camera phone and do interesting stuff with it. To start with, and a lot of people probably wouldn't say this, and probably wouldn't even like me saying this. I think 60 to 70% of it is processing. So I think it kind of doesn't matter what camera you're using. So the stuff you can do today in Lightroom, the way you can change a photograph, and what you can do with it there, a huge amount of it is in the processing. And particularly if you're publishing online, you don't necessarily need a mega resolution picture. I mean, it only can be so big online, and people are going to see it. You're not making prints of it necessarily when you're starting out, I don't think. So I think, I think just getting any camera and shooting. I do think DSLRs, you can do things with DSLRs that you can't do with like a camera phone. But a lot of people will say, I'm starting out, I want to buy a DSLR, which one should I buy? Should I buy this Canon 5D Mark II, brand new at B&H? And I'll say, no. You're starting out, go to eBay and buy a used 20D for $600 and get yourself a 50 millimeter f1.8 for less than $100. And go out and shoot with a cheap thing. And if you like it and you're into it, you can always sell that back on eBay and not lose any money, and then go out and buy a Canon 5D Mark II when you're ready. It's kind of like I decided a number of years ago that I was going to play golf, which I hate golf. I don't know what I was thinking. I mean, if it's a golf course, how many pictures can you take of a golf course? So I went out and I bought these Ping golf clubs. These were nice. I said, oh yeah, I'm going to make a better golfer with these Pings. And I think I used them twice. I ended up selling them back, but then lost a bunch of money because I bought them new and stuff like that. So I think with the camera stuff too. I mean, buy something used. I think even buy just a very basic setup. See if you like it, and then you can always go from there. But I think a lot of it is the processing. A lot of it's your eye and the time and getting what you get. Another question back there.
You mentioned like the date-based folder. What's your strategy for naming folders and naming photographs?
Okay. Yeah, I've got a lot of photographs. So many photographs that I have at this point over 1 million frames of raw files. So Lightroom can't really manage that many. It just bogs down and goes too slow. So what I do is everything is for any day is in a folder by that day. So 2011-12-08, and everything from that day goes in that folder. And then I keep everything on stuff I have to be processed, and I'm 2 years behind on my processing right now. So I'm working on basically, January 2010 right now is how far beyond. But I do jump forward and do some like Death Valley shots and things like that. So I do kind of skip ahead a little bit sometimes. But for the most part, I've got my to be processed and my archived. And my to be processed are all in folders by dates. I'll bring them to my Mac. I'll import them into Lightroom. I'll work on them. I'll save the file, the catalog file for that folder once I make all my changes in Lightroom and export the files as JPEG. And then it goes in my archive folder. So I already done that day. And then I'll just keep them by dates and just bring them on my hard drive as I process them and then take them back off when I'm done. Question? I only shoot RAW. Yeah, I don't really see any reason to shoot JPEG. Myself, I'm going to process everything. I can do more with a RAW file than I can with a JPEG file. Particularly, I believe a lot of it is in the post-production. That scene did not look like that when I took that picture. These were taken seconds apart, and they still look very different. So, but I have a lot more things I can do with RAW files. Again, this is actually the exact same frame that looks three ways. Actually 4 ways. This is the exact same RAW file for all 4 of those photographs. So other questions?
Do you shoot typically at medium resolution to keep the raw file size manageable?
No, I shoot at the highest possible RAW resolution. Storage is so cheap these days. I mean, there's just no reason why. Even I could put a 64 gigabyte card in my camera. They're not that much money. I can offload it. Hard drives are cheap. There's just no reason not to get the best stuff. And I don't throw any files away. Even if I don't like the file, I'll save it because you may be able to do something with it in the future. A lot of my shots from 3 years ago, I said, that's too noisy, I don't want it. And then Adobe Lightroom 3 comes out with this great noise reduction technology, so now all of a sudden I can salvage some old shots. So, question?
You may be the worst person ever to ask this question, but how do you get followers on Google Plus?
On Google Plus?
I get followers on other places like
Well,
none of my friends are active. I have friends that are all inactive.
What you do is you show up to Vic Gundotra's office with a big suitcase full of money.
True story.
No, I mean, obviously, I am on the recommended user list for Google Plus, and that adds a lot of people. As far as Google Plus goes, I did get on very, very early. I was very interested in this photography space. I'd been down here having lunch with Brian, a year before Google Plus even ever launched. So having no idea what you guys were up to even. But I have had a huge interest. I was a big user on Google Buzz of photography, and I was very interested in photography with Google. So I know, when Brian invited me to the site, the day it was open for the beta, so I jumped right on. I said, this is great. I love it. And so I basically went to my network, which is a lot of people in the social photo sharing space, on Flickr, on Twitter, everywhere else, and said, hey, you got to get here. I wrote blog posts. So I pulled, I think, a lot of my own friends, photographer friends, into Google Plus. And I got on early, so I was able to build up an early following. And then, circles get shared, and you're in those, and so you get more. And then you guys did the recommended user list, and so I'm on that as a photographer. So I think, there's a lot of ways that you end up with a lot of followers. Certainly the recommended list is a huge thing. That's, Trey and I both are on the picks section of that list, and so that accounts for a lot of people. But, I think being active too, people want to see you active on the site. They want to see you in Hangouts. They want to see that you're a part of it, a part of the community. We're doing this new Hangout video cast. I think stuff like that's great, visibility. But just being active, and I had a big following coming in. So I had, not nowhere near as the number of followers I have on Google, but I was one of the most followed accounts on Flickr, for instance. So I had all these people, and I could evangelize Google Plus to and say, hey, come on over. So I was able to bring in a lot of these people. So to sort of have a head start where somebody's just starting out and they don't have a big network to bring in. So I think those were kind of all factors. I'm very active on it. Question?
Yeah, what's the best way to learn photo projects? Find some of these programs pretty complicated.
Yeah, I like Lightroom. I think Lightroom's pretty easy. There's a lot of online tutorials that are free that'll show you how to do it. I think spend some time, even some of the stuff, these like Hangouts on Google+. Hang out with Scott Jarvie. Scott Jarvie is an easy guy to get a hold of. He hangs out all the time. look for Scott Jarvie when he's on a Hangout and just hop in. And even if he's not already processing, Scott's like processing like 50% of the time, and he hangs out all the time. But just say, hey, Scott, you mind processing some photos? And I'll be, oh, yeah, sure. No, here we go. And he'll jump right in, and he's very good, you know, but you can see, and you can say, hey, what did you just do there? What did you use a brush there? I think Lightroom, there's a lot of people that will spend 8 hours on a photograph. They'll bring it into Photoshop. They'll do 18 different layers. They'll do all kinds of things. I don't do that. Guys like Jarvie don't do that. I think that, you know, I think that you can pick it up on tutorials. You can pick it up online. You can pick it up in the community. So I think just go with that way. I think Hangouts are a great way. Other quick question?
So sometimes when you're starting to take photos, you struggle with some stuff, for example, white balance in cameras.
Yeah.
How do you do that whenever you're taking photos? Do you do everything on the post-processing or on the camera?
Again, so much of it post-processing. I mean, you can take, you know, a photograph, you know, let's say this photograph here, and we can go to the develop module, and we can go up here to our temperature on the white balance, and we can make it look like this, or we can make it look like that, very hot, very cold. You know, you can pretty much, you know, you have a lot of control after the fact with that. So a lot of this stuff, should I be on this setting, should I be on that setting in the camera? You know, a lot of people come to me and say, well, you know, why did you shoot that at ISO 800? And ISO 800, 400, 200, 1600, what is the difference? It's a Canon 5D Mark II, it can go up to 6400. But, you know, there's really, I don't think in the camera actually matters quite as much as a lot of people do. You know, I think a lot of it can be done in processing, you know, after the fact. You know, I know a lot of people will take more time and set up shots and do different things with stuff in camera, but I don't. So, and, you know, again, I think if to learn processing, find some interesting people, you know. Karen Hutton's here. Hang out with Karen. Make her process a photo for you. She's a master. She's quite good. You know, she did that great shot of Lotus in the car. I don't know how you made her hair blow when it wasn't even blowing in real life. It's like we had a fan there or something. Did she? Yeah. I mean, there's some stuff. I don't know what she did there, but you know, yeah, it's magic. But you know, find people that you like their processing, and you'd be surprised. I mean, people ask me in Hangouts all the time. You know, oh, we process a photo. Sure, yeah, here you go. I'll process this. And so I don't think processing is that hard. I mean, there are some things you can do to be very, very complicated and make it harder than it has to be. But other questions?
I find that I have a backlog of about 100,000 photos of Burning Man, fire dancing, and whatnot.
Okay.
I find that the most time-consuming thing is selecting the keepers and such. It takes me longer to do that than I spend the total time on a trip.
Yeah.
How do you do that reasonably?
You know, yeah, I have the same problem. Flagging takes a lot of time. You know, if I have a shoot, I wonder what I've got in my library right now. Yeah, nothing really worth showing there. You know, if I have a shoot, yeah, if I take 5,000 photographs and I end up processing 1,000, the time to go through each 5,000 and flag them all. I mean, there's some ways that you can speed that up a little bit, you know, flash memory in the computer instead of a regular hard drive. You know, it's things like that make Lightroom go a little bit faster. Make sure you have enough RAM, 8 gigabytes of RAM, you know, to try to get it to go a little bit faster. But
it's not the computer, it's the decision making.
That's true too. Yeah, yeah. A lot of times that's just a manual process, and I think we all go through that. You know, it's one of my least favorite parts of processing. Typically, in a day, I'll shoot anywhere on a trip, I'll shoot anywhere from 3,000 to 6,000 frames, and to have to go through those frames one by one and flag. But then once you got them flagged, then you can start processing them. So.
We're actually out of time, so if there's just one last question.
Okay.
One question builds on that. You're really experienced at this point. What fraction of photos do you end up being able to keep?
I probably keep 20%.
That's pretty high, actually.
Yeah, I keep about 20%. So. Great. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. I really enjoyed it. And,